Hey everyone, today I want to do a ranking of all 21 books that I've read of Dean Koontz. And most of these books are ones I read quite a while ago. I first got into reading Dean Koontz when I was about 21, and at that time I fell in love with him and just kind of read a bunch of his books, and I've slowed down a lot since then. I haven't read any of his books since last year, so most of these books are ones I read quite a while ago. And I've just always wanted to do this and haven't gotten around to it until now. So yeah, we're just going to go through and I'm going to rank all of his books from least favorite to favorite. And of course, as usual with these types of lists, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not going based on what I think is the best or the worst one. This is just my opinion on his books. So, and I'm also not going to include his nonfiction book, A Big Little Life, which is about his dog and also sort of an autobiography. It's kind of hard to compare that nonfiction book to his fiction books. So technically I've read 22 of his novels or books, but I'm just going to be doing 21 here. So let's just get started, jump right into it. At number 21, the very bottom of the list, we have The Mask. Now, The Mask is a very cheesy like horror novel. It's sort of reminiscent of like cheesy 70s and 80s horror flicks. It's basically about a young couple that adopts a girl who is basically like an evil kid. It's sort of like the evil kid trope, like The Omen or the Orphan movie or something like that. And it sounds like it might be just cheesy fun, but it's really not. It's very dull. And probably the most flawed thing about this book is the ending, or lack thereof, I should say. The Mask doesn't even have a proper ending. The book just stops. Like in the middle of the action, like of the climax of the story, like it just stops. Like there's not even a proper ending. And when I was reading it for the first time, I'm like, what? Like I'm like flipping back and forth between the pages, wondering where the rest of it is at. And I looked it up, and apparently that's just the way the book is. I didn't have like a flawed copy with a missing page or anything. The book just stops. I'm like, what is this crap? So yeah, The Mask is definitely my least favorite Dean Koontz book. And I also believe it's one of his older works too, before he really kind of got into the flow of things. So yeah. At number 20, we have House of Thunder. Now, this is one of the earlier Koontz books that I read, and I liked it starting out. This book does have some creepy moments to it. It's basically about this woman that wakes up in a hospital, and she doesn't know why she's there. She doesn't know what happened. She has no memory of anything. And the doctors tell her that she can't leave. She has to stay there in the hospital. And she's in this room with another patient in the hospital, and they're kind of hidden behind like the curtain or whatever around the hospital bed, and she doesn't know who it is, and she hears strange sounds coming from the hospital bed, and she's really creeped out by this. And there are some like creepy moments in this book from what I remember. But the book quickly becomes very repetitive as nothing really happens. She sort of just stays in her hospital bed throughout the length of the book with nothing really happening. And it just gets very boring very quickly. And then when we start to get to like the big twist and the climax of the story, and we figure out what really happened and why she's in the hospital, the whole reveal of everything is just so dumb. Terrible twist. The reason why she's in the hospital is just ridiculous. She slowly regains her memory, and it's just, I did not like the direction the story went in like the third act, I guess. It just was not very good. So yeah, The House of Thunder is number 20 for me. At number 19, we have Strangers. Now, this is actually one of Koontz's more popular books, I believe. And I believe this was one of his very first bestsellers. And Strangers is sort of like his epic tale, I guess. I believe in an interview or somewhere I read he stated that he wanted to write a really long, like, epic story. And it is really long. This is like a 700-page book, I think. Like between 600 and 700 pages, I believe. And it's about these several characters that are sort of drawn together and like tied up in this mystery. And really, this story was just too long for me, just too bloated, too convoluted, and it was very anticlimactic. I really did not like the ending on this one, and again, kind of like the House of Thunder. It just took a really weird direction towards the end. It has to do with like a government conspiracy. I'm not really into that type of thing. A lot of Koontz novels, you might hear me complain about that on this list. A lot of Koontz novels deal with like government conspiracies and all that sorts of thing. And it gets kind of old. And this one follows that same route. And I just was not a fan of it. So yeah, Strangers comes in at number 19 for me. At number 18, we have Darkfall. Now, Darkfall, this is also one of Koontz's earlier novels. I believe in the late 70s, early 80s he wrote this one. And this one is basically about a cop going up against this voodoo magic, essentially. There's these evil creatures that start terrorizing this town. And there's this guy sort of commanding them and who plans on, like, taking over the town or the world even. Like, there's a portal to hell that opens up. And again, this one sounds like it has kind of a cool idea, and it sounds like it would be a really entertaining story. But for some reason, I just felt like it was really dull. I just was not drawn in by the story here. It just felt very formulaic. I believe this one also falls victim to having like sort of a typical, stereotypical kind of romance between the cop and this other character. And I don't know. I just was not a big fan of this one. So yeah, Darkfall comes in at number 18 for me. At number 17, we have Whispers. Now, Whispers is also an earlier work of Koontz. And this one is basically about this psychopathic guy that goes around killing women. And there is one scene in this book that's very, very disturbing and disgusting. And I always remember this book by that one scene. If you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. It is just absolutely horrendous. Every time I think about this book, I think of that scene. And after reading this book, I felt like I had to take 20 showers to get rid of that out of my brain. But yeah, this one was just okay. I enjoyed this book a little bit, and this one actually did have kind of a neat twist to it, unlike the previous books I've mentioned. But overall, it was just okay. It was one of his earlier works. So again, I don't think Koontz had really gotten into the flow of things yet with his writing. It did feel a little bit formulaic at times, but yeah, this one was just okay. I think I give this book like a 2.5 out of 5 stars, or maybe 3 stars. So yeah, Whispers is number 17. At number 16, we have False Memory. And this is one of his newer-ish works. I think this was like 90s or early 2000s. I don't know. I'll put a date up here along with the picture of the book. And this one is one of his books I'm very conflicted on. I think I'm more so disappointed with it than anything, but I'm very conflicted on it because it starts out amazing. The first like 100 or so pages of this book is very intense, very suspenseful. Koontz writes suspense like no other author that I've ever read, which I think is one of the reasons I've enjoyed his work so much. He just does suspense very, very well. And in this book, we have a character who has agoraphobia, I believe it is, if I'm remembering correctly, where she's afraid to go outside. And she's going to see like this therapist to try to help her get over it. And it turns out that this therapist or doctor of hers is actually the one, like, sort of hypnotizing her and putting this spell on her, like, creating this phobia, where she's afraid to go outside. And it turns out that, and this isn't really a spoiler, by the way, this is revealed somewhat early on in the book, I believe. And he does this to other characters in the story, where he inflicts these phobias and fears upon them so he can basically do bad things to them. There's some pretty nasty stuff in this story. The villain, this doctor, therapist guy, whatever he is a very just diabolical, just evil guy. And Koontz creates this character very well. He is very messed up dude. And yeah, there's some really good suspense in this story. Unfortunately, it falls off less than halfway through, and it's very meandering. And this is a longer book too. This one's like 600 plus pages, I think. And this story just loses steam. Like, once we get to the halfway point, from there on out, it just really loses its steam. And the ending to this one is really dumb too. There's a big twist and reveal. Spoiler alert. Again, kind of like a government conspiracy type of thing. And the reason, you know, I'm just going to spoil it right out. The reason, or part of the reason, the bad guy, the doctor, is doing all of this stuff is because he was a writer or an aspiring writer who couldn't make it big, and someone was like blackmailing him and like writing a bunch of bad reviews on Amazon off his books and everything. And yeah, it's literally as stupid as it sounds. So I don't know. This is one I'm very conflicted on because there is a lot of potential with this book. Like I said, I was really enjoying it to begin with, but it just goes in some really weird directions towards the end. I don't know what Koontz was thinking with this one. I don't know. False Memory, guys. This was a really weird one. The ending and climax and the reveal and everything just did not work at all. So yeah, False Memory is number 16. At number 15, we have Dragon Tears. And Dragon Tears is one that I've heard a lot of good things about. And I think this is sort of like a fan favorite of his. But this one to me is basically just a more refined version of Darkfall. It's basically about this cop once again battling this sort of like voodoo magic. There's this guy who is really evil and trying to like destroy this city basically. And he has these like psychic powers, and he's able to freeze time and like take the form of other like monsters and characters and things. And it just, I mean, it's kind of an interesting concept, and the story did have its moments. I did enjoy it. I didn't dislike it, but it just felt super formulaic like a lot of Koontz novels do. And yeah, this one was just okay. Not Darkfall. Dragon Tears is probably like a 3 out of 5 star book for me. So yeah, Dragon Tears is number 15. At number 14, we have Phantoms. In Phantoms, I kind of appreciate this one because this one is the most pure like horror out of all Koontz novels, I think. He does tend to use the horror element a lot in his novels, but I would never say that Koontz is a horror author. I'd say he's primarily like suspense with elements of sci-fi and sometimes horror, but Phantoms is definitely a very direct horror novel, and it's basically about this ancient creature, almost of like a Lovecraftian type of inspiration, not quite, but somewhat similar, that just wreaks havoc on this small town in California. And it's kind of entertaining. I enjoyed this book for what it was, but again, it's nothing super original or innovative. It just felt like kind of a cheesy horror novel, and definitely not one of my favorite Koontz books, which is why it comes in at number 14. So at number 13, we have Demon Seed. And this one is definitely one of his more unique books, even though it's an earlier book. So there's actually 2 versions of Demon Seed. I believe the first one he wrote in the 70s, and then he did a revised version of this that he released in the 90s. And I believe I read the revised version, if I remember correctly. And I enjoyed this book. This is a really, like, cheesy sci-fi horror comedy. I don't know, this is a weird one. There's a lot of humor in this book. It doesn't really take itself all that seriously. And some of it works. Some of it's funny. But it also drags a little bit. And I don't know. It's not a book I would ever read again. This is also like a 3 out of 5 star book for me. So yeah, Demon Seed was an okay one. At number 12, we have Mr. Murder. And this is one of the most recent books I've read of his. I read this one last year. And this one is basically Dean Koontz's version of like Stephen King's Dark Half, where this like alter ego, this lookalike of the main character comes to steal his life. And the main character happens to be a writer. And it's very similar to Stephen King's The Dark Half, if you've read that. I actually just read Stephen King's The Dark Half recently for the first time. And I actually don't know which one came first, but anyway, Mr. Murder was a decent story. Again, it sort of felt a bit formulaic. And I think they all sort of feel that way after a while, after you've read so many of his books. But this one did have its moments of suspense and action and fun. But it ended up just being okay. This is another like 3-star book for me. And this one also spawned Koontz's books for children, Santa's Evil Twin, I believe it's called, and Robot Santa. I believe those are the names of them. So this book has like poetry from those books in it that he would use to create those. So yeah, that's something that was kind of interesting. But yeah, Mr. Murder was just okay. That comes in at number 12. At number 11, we have Cold Fire. Now this is one of the earlier books that I read by him. I want to say this was like the third or fourth book that I read by Koontz, maybe. I don't remember this one a whole lot, but I do remember thinking it was pretty good. This one is, I'd say, like suspense with elements of sci-fi. It's basically about this guy that he doesn't predict the future. He kind of does. He gets these instincts or these like premonitions that something bad's about to happen, and he has to go and save the day and save this person from a near accident. And eventually it starts to catch up with him, and whatever psychic powers he has, they begin to hurt him and cause him like physical pain. And he has to go and like try to figure out like what's going on exactly. And he's being drawn to this certain location, this windmill. And from there, that's where like all the crazy sci-fi stuff starts to happen, and there's a bunch of big twists. And I remember enjoying this book. I thought about rereading it because this one is a little bit blurry in my memory. But I do remember thinking it was pretty decent. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So yeah, that's about all I have to say for that one. Cold Fire comes in at number 11. At number 10, we have Lightning. And now this one is basically about a young girl. We follow her from her life as a child all the way up into adulthood. And during moments of her life, there's a stranger that appears and saves her from tragic events. And the stranger never ages. He always looks the same. And later in the story, we learn that he's from the past and he's time traveling to protect her. And this one, I'm not the biggest fan of like time travel stuff. I think it's okay, but it's not like a subgenre that I often seek out or anything like that. But this story is very, very suspenseful, very tight. It's a lot tighter and not as convoluted or bloated as some of other Koontz's books. But yeah, this one was also just kind of decent. It's not one of my favorite Dean Koontz novels, but I just did like a lot of the actions and suspense of it. It was just a very quick, entertaining read, and I think it was only like 350 pages, so it's a lot leaner than some of his other books as well. So yeah, Lightning comes in at number 10. At number 9, we have Strange Highways. This is, I believe, Dean Koontz's only collection of short stories. And like most short story collections, it's a bit of a mixed bag. There are some stories in here that I really enjoyed, and others that I never want to read again. So overall, I think I ended up giving this one like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And I think my favorite stories in this collection were Strange Highways, Chase, Down in the Darkness, and Twilight of the Dawn. A lot of the other stories I could have did without, but yeah, overall, this was an okay collection of stories, and it comes in at number 9. At number 8, we have Midnight. Now, this is also one I'm very, very conflicted on, much like False Memory. It starts out with a very suspenseful opening. There's basically these characters, multiple characters that are running for their lives against these creatures, and it's left a little bit ambiguous of what they are exactly, but I think the closest thing I can describe them to without fully giving it away is that these creatures are sort of like werewolves, and it is absolutely terrifying. The first few opening chapters of this book is just some of the best suspense I've ever read in my life, and it is just super creepy, super action-packed. These characters in this small town in California are just running for their lives. There's these supposed werewolves running loose, just attacking and killing these people, and it is just crazy, and nobody knows what the hell is going on. And from there, things slow down quite a bit, and we start to learn there's a cop lead character and a few other characters that sort of band together to solve this mystery of what the hell is going on and what are these creatures. And it starts to unravel pretty slowly from there. The middle drags a little bit. And when we do learn exactly what is going on, it kind of takes away from the story for me, because I was thinking it kind of alludes to being more of a horror, like supernatural story. But then things turn more into like sci-fi-ish. There's a lot of sci-fi elements going on. And there's a lead villain that's sort of directing all of this terror and these creatures that he kind of, spoiler alert, I guess, sort of created. And there's also kind of like a government conspiracy one in this one as well. So I was not a fan of the direction this story took, much like False Memory. But overall, it was still a lot of fun just for how bonkers and crazy this book was. I just wished it would have gone in a little bit of a different direction than it did. So yeah, Midnight comes in at number 8 for me. At number 7, we have The Voice of the Night. Now, this is also a pretty unique story from Dean Koontz, which is why it's so high up on my list. And part of the reason for that is the main character is a kid. I believe he's a 14-year-old boy. And it follows him trying to adapt to new life in this small town. And he makes this friend who sort of like breaks him out of his mold. The main character is kind of shy and timid. And his new friend helps him to like come out of his shell a little bit. But it turns out that his new friend is not who he appears to be at first and has sort of psychopathic tendencies. And he tries telling his mom, his parents are divorced, he just lives with his mother, and he tries telling his mom about this new friend of his and what he plans to do and some of the things he's already done, and his mom doesn't believe him. They don't have a good relationship, and he's sort of on his own to like work out this like budding friendship that's sort of descending into something much worse. And yeah, this is a really entertaining story. I really like this one. It has a few flaws, but I do think this is one of Koontz's more unique novels, and I really enjoyed it for the most part. So yeah, Voice of the Night comes in at number 7. At number 6, we have Shattered. Now, Shattered is a very straightforward suspense thriller. There's no sci-fi, no horror, nothing in this book like that. And this is also one of his earlier works. I believe this was published in the late 70s, early 80s, I want to say. And I think the reason I like this one so much is just because it doesn't have all of the government conspiracy crap that's in a lot of his other books. It doesn't have any stupid, crazy twists to it, or like, it doesn't really feel as formulaic as some of the others. It's just a pretty straightforward suspense thriller novel, and it's enjoyable. It's basically about this young guy who's, I believe, newlywed or about to be married, and he's with his younger brother-in-law, I believe, if I remember correctly. Forgive me, it's been a while since I've read these. And they're traveling cross-country to move to their new home in California. And there's this psychopath following them all the way and trying to kill them. And it's very suspenseful, very entertaining. Nothing groundbreaking. Like I said, it's just a very straightforward story. But I just like it for how simple it is. When Koontz, I think, really reins in his writing and keeps things a bit more tight and lean, he's able to write a very effective thriller. And when he's not going off on his tangents and stuff. And yeah, so Shattered comes in at number 6. At number 5, we have one that I wasn't a huge fan of right away, and this is one of the more recent ones that I read. I read this early last year, I believe. But it's gotten higher up on my list the more I've thought about it, and that is The Bad Place. Now, this is one that I'm also very conflicted on. But ultimately, I think its strengths outweigh its flaws a little bit. And believe me, it does have some glaring flaws. But to me, the highlight of this story is the villainous characters in it. In this book, Dean Koontz creates some characters that are unlike anything he's ever done. There's this family of, I guess we'll say villains. I mean, they're the antagonists of the story. And they all have these psychic powers. It's sort of like, I guess you could say, almost like a superhero type story a little bit. And they're trying to kill one of the other members of their family who chooses to use his powers for good, I guess you could say. And it's just super, super unique, super creative. I love the ideas in this book. And some of the twists in this one, and the reveals of the characters, namely the main antagonist of this family, the Pollard family. There's a long explanation at the end. It's sort of an info dump, but the explanation of what he is and why he is this way. He's super like violent. He has violent tendencies and is just super evil and just wants to kill everyone. The explanation behind it is absolutely bonkers. If you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. It's just off the walls crazy. Like, who in a million years would think of something like that? Apparently, Koontz thought of it. And I have to give him all the credit for coming up with just something so wild and ridiculous. But it's awesome. And I just love the two sisters in this book as well. There's two evil sisters that are sort of like, they're not witches, but they have like these psychic powers. And they're very like sensual and like seductive. And they almost remind me a little bit of the two sisters from the movie Spider Baby. And I wonder if maybe Koontz drew some inspiration from old horror films for this book, because the whole family aspect is very slightly reminiscent, I think, of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even though this book is nothing like that movie. This book is very much focused on this family. And the two sisters, again, they sort of remind me of the two sisters from Spider Baby. And yeah, it's just really cool. So this book does have a lot of flaws to it. Like I said, there's some info dumping. There's some plot points that don't really make sense. Not everything is fully explained, and the ending isn't completely satisfying. But still, I have to give Koontz credit for writing a more unique novel that really, I don't know, this book is just crazy. The Bad Place comes in at number 5. At number 4, we have Watchers. Now, Watchers, I think, pretty much speaks for itself. This is, I believe, Koontz's most popular book, as well as being his own personal favorite. And this one is just a cheesy, fun book. This is one you kind of go into suspending your disbelief a little bit and just going along with the ride. It's about this super intelligent dog. And yeah, this is just a really fun book. I feel like a lot of people know about Watchers at this point. And yeah, Watchers comes in at number 4. At number 3, we have Odd Thomas. Odd Thomas is one of Koontz's best books, easily, in my opinion. This is not just one of my personal favorites. It went on to spawn multiple sequels. I have not read the sequels because I think I like Odd Thomas as a standalone novel. I'm not really too keen to go out and read the other ones, especially from what I've heard of them. The sequels aren't always that great. But I do love this first book. And one of the things I like about it the best is it really breaks the mold of the typical Koontz book. Like I said, a lot of his books tend to be a bit formulaic. And this one, especially the ending, I won't spoil it, but the ending is a lot different than what you would expect of a Koontz novel. It does something he normally doesn't do. And it's a very emotional, very impactful type of ending. And it works well. So yeah, Odd Thomas is a really great book. I highly recommend it. And it comes in at number 3 for me. At number 2, we have Twilight Eyes. Now, this is the very first Dean Koontz book that I've ever read. And it has been a while since I've read it. Like I said, probably about 6 years ago, roughly. And I want to give it a reread to see if my thoughts change on it at all. I might reread it this year. But from what I remember, this book is incredible. Absolutely amazing. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. It did have a couple of minor flaws with it. But I just was so in love with the premise, the concept of this book, that the minor flaws I had with it didn't really affect my overall enjoyment of it. And it's basically about this young man named Slim McKenzie. I believe he's in his early 20s, like late teens, early 20s. And he goes to work he runs away from home and goes to work at this carnival. And he has this ability called Twilight Eyes, where he can see these demons that are disguised as people. And they're called different things throughout the book, not just demons. I believe they're also known as like creatures, and primarily as goblins. And these goblins or demons disguised as people are basically hell-bent on taking over the world. And Slim McKenzie has to try to stop them. And whenever he comes across these goblins, he has to figure out a way to kill them without, while remaining like secretive about it, because, you know, he can't just go around killing people and then he'll end up in prison or whatever. But yeah, this was just a really, really good book. I absolutely love Twilight Eyes. And the story is actually split up into 2 parts. So the first part was written, I believe, in the early 80s. And then the second part was written like late 80s. And then later published as one book. And the first part is a little bit better. The second part isn't quite as good as part 1. But it's an incredible book overall. And I absolutely love Twilight Eyes and recommend this Dean Koontz novel. So, that brings us to number 1. My personal favorite Dean Koontz novel, and also, I believe, probably his best book, like from a more objective standpoint as well. And that is Intensity. Now, Intensity is a book that grabs you from the very beginning and does not let go. This book proves why Dean Koontz is the master of suspense. And I don't want to really share anything about the plot of this book or give anything away. This is just one that, if you're a fan of thrillers or suspense, even just more of a casual fan, I would highly recommend Intensity. There is nothing like it, honestly. This book is just absolutely incredible. Perfect 5 out of 5 stars. I have no issues with this book whatsoever. It is honestly one of my favorite books I've ever read. And this is if you ever read a Dean Koontz book, if you only ever read one Dean Koontz book in your life, this is the one you need to experience. So yeah, Intensity is number 1, my favorite Dean Koontz book. And that is it, guys. That is my ranking of all 21 Dean Koontz books that I've read. Let me know what your thoughts are on this author or some of his works down in the comments below. I'd love to discuss it with you guys. And that's pretty much all I have for today. So thanks for watching. Peace.